The Empire Strikes Back wasn't just a sequel, it was a personal bet George Lucas made with his own money, his own company, and everything he had built since Star Wars. Today, we're counting down 14 weird facts about The Empire Strikes Back. Stick around for number 1 because Harrison Ford didn't know the truth about Vader until the night of the premiere.
I am your father.
Fact 14, the ending that almost wasn't The Empire Strikes Back almost ended differently. And the version that nearly made it to theaters would have changed everything that followed. Early story discussions included a version where Luke's confrontation with Vader ended in a conventional hero's victory rather than defeat in Revelation. The dark, unresolved closing, Han frozen in carbonite, Luke physically broken, the rebellion scattered, was deeply unconventional for a 1980 blockbuster sequel. Test audiences were unsettled by it. Studio executives pushed back. An ending where the heroes won cleanly was floated as an alternative. Lucas refused. He had conceived the trilogy as a single story, and the second chapter had to end in genuine darkness. Not a false resolution the third film would simply undo. The ending audiences saw was the ending Lucas protected against considerable institutional pressure. A franchise built on hope survived because its creator was willing to close the middle chapter with despair. The version where Luke wins in Cloud City stayed on the cutting room floor. The version where he falls made cinema history. Fact 13, Kirshner said no first. Then his agent forced him. Irvin Kershner's first response when George Lucas offered him The Empire Strikes Back was refusal. Kershner had been Lucas's professor at USC and was one of the few directors Lucas genuinely respected, which is why he was Lucas's first choice. Kershner's objection was philosophical. Sequels are never as good as the originals. He didn't want to make a film that would inevitably be compared unfavorably to something he considered nearly perfect. His agent disagreed with this position and made it non-negotiable. The agent told Kershner plainly that he had to take the job. Kershner took it. He spent the production pushing back against Lucas's instincts, slowing the pace down, investing more in character moments, and insisting on emotional weight in scenes that Lucas's outline had treated as connective tissue. The film that resulted is widely considered superior to the one Kershner had been too principled to want to direct. His agent was right. He was wrong. He was gracious enough to say so. Fact 12, Paul Verhoeven screened the wrong film. Before Irvin Kershner was confirmed, George Lucas and producer Gary Kurtz had exploratory conversations with other directors. Paul Verhoeven, the Dutch filmmaker who would later make RoboCop, Total Recall, and Basic Instinct, was one of them. He arrived at his meeting with Lucas and Kurtz, having brought a print of his new film to screen for them. Spetters, a raw and sexually explicit Dutch drama that Verhoeven himself later described as a Dutch, more adult version of Grease. He screened it. Lucas and Kurtz sat through it. Verhoeven never heard from them again. The director who was being considered for the most anticipated film in the world had brought the exact wrong piece of work to demonstrate his suitability. Lucas turned immediately to Kershner after the Verhoeven meeting. Spetters was the last film Paul Verhoeven screened at a Star Wars pitch. Nobody asked for a second one. Fact 11. The first screenwriter died before filming. Started Lee Brackett was one of Hollywood's most respected screenwriters. The woman who had written The Big Sleep for Howard Hawks, worked on Rio Bravo, and spent decades as one of the sharpest genre writers in the industry. Lucas hired her to write the first draft of The Empire Strikes Back. She delivered it. Lucas's reaction, documented by multiple production sources, was confusion. The draft bore little resemblance to what he had asked for. His notes on the script consisted in significant part of the word no, written in the margins. Before he could deliver those notes to Brackett for a revision, she died of cancer in March 1978 at the age of 62. Lucas wrote the next draft himself and then hired Lawrence Kasdan, who would later write Raiders of the Lost Ark, to develop the final screenplay. Brackett received a full writing credit on the finished film as a professional courtesy. Almost none of her dialogue survived. Her name is on one of the greatest screenplays in cinema history for a draft that was rejected before the cameras rolled. Fact 10. Norway's worst blizzard in 50 years hit the Hoth chute. The opening act of The Empire Strikes Back takes place on the ice planet Hoth. Production designer Norman Reynolds chose Finse, Norway, a remote mountain village near the Hardanger-Juklin Glacier, as the filming location. While the crew was in Finns, the area was struck by its worst blizzard in 50 years. Temperatures dropped so severely that crew members could not exit the hotel on certain mornings. The wind and snow made outdoor filming impossible for days at a time. The production adapted by filming some sequences directly from the hotel doorway, the crew holding cameras at the threshold while actors performed in conditions that were genuinely dangerous. The authenticity of the Hoth sequences is not a production design achievement. It is the result of a cast and crew that was actually stranded in a Norwegian blizzard and had no practical alternative to pointing the camera at it. Lucas had previously filmed Star Wars in Tunisia during that region's first major rainstorm in 50 years. His productions had a specific relationship with historically unusual weather. Fact 9. The Wampa scene was added because of a real car accident. The opening sequence in which Luke Skywalker is attacked by a Wampa creature and wakes up suspended upside down in an ice cave exists because of a real car accident. Mark Hamill had been involved in an automobile accident in January 1977 between Star Wars and Empire that left visible scarring on his face, particularly around his nose. The production needed an in-universe explanation for the facial differences audiences would notice between the two films. The Wampa attack provided it. Luke emerges from the creature's cave with fresh wounds, giving the scars narrative justification. The scene also served as an early demonstration of Luke's emerging Force abilities as he pulls his lightsaber from the ice to escape. A scene designed entirely around a real physical injury became one of the film's most effective early character moments. Hamill's accident shaped the story's opening in ways the original outline never anticipated. Fact 8. David Prowse delivered the wrong line the entire shoot. The most important line in The Empire Strikes Back, the revelation that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father, was kept secret from almost everyone on the production. David Prowse, who wore the Vader costume on set, was given a different line to deliver during filming. "No, Obi-Wan killed your father." That is what Prowse said. That is what the crew heard. That is what the other actors responded to on set. James Earl Jones, who voiced Vader in post-production, recorded the real line in a session of extraordinary secrecy. The substitution was so complete that cast and crew who witnessed the Bespin confrontation being filmed genuinely believed the Obi-Wan line was the film's twist right up until the premiere. Prowse later said he had suspected something was wrong, that the line felt too small for the moment. He was correct. He had spent an entire shoot delivering the cover story for one of cinema's greatest revelations. The real line was recorded without him. Fact 7. Only 3 people knew the truth. When The Empire Strikes Back went into production, 3 people knew that Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father: George Lucas, Irvin Kershner, and Mark Hamill. Kershner told Hamill privately so the actor could react with genuine understanding, rather than manufactured confusion in the Bespin sequence. Hamill kept it completely secret, not telling his castmates, not discussing it with the crew, not confirming even when pressed in interviews during production. Everyone else on set, including Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Lawrence Kasdan, believed Vader's big revelation involved Obi-Wan. The entire cast and crew signed the non-disclosure agreements. The secrecy held. When the film premiered and Vader's line was heard by the full cast for the first time, the room registered genuine shock. Harrison Ford leaned toward Hamill and whispered something that has since become one of cinema's most repeated behind-the-scenes quotes. The secret had held through an entire production. 3 people had kept it, none of them broke. Fact 6. Yoda was performed by the man who voiced Miss Piggy Frank Oz, performed and voiced Yoda for The Empire Strikes Back. Oz was already one of the most experienced puppeteers and Muppet performers in the world, and the man behind Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, Animal, and Sam the Eagle on The Muppet Show. His casting as Yoda was not accidental. Jim Henson recommended him to George Lucas. Oz performed Yoda's body using a combination of his right hand inside the puppet's head for facial expressions and additional operators for the body movements. The physicality of Yoda, the way he moves, sits, walks with his cane, and handles objects, was built from Oz's instincts as a puppeteer and his understanding that the character needed to feel ancient and deliberate in every gesture. Oz received no on-screen acting credit for the original theatrical release. He was listed in the credits under the Muppets-related description. The man who created one of cinema's most beloved characters was officially credited as though he had shown up to maintain equipment. Fact 5. The Dagobah bog creature was filmed in Lucas's swimming pool. Most of the Dagobah sequences were filmed on a stage built at EMI Elstree Studios in England, a swamp environment constructed with real water, real plants, and controlled humidity that made the set genuinely uncomfortable for the cast and crew. One shot was not filmed at Elstree. The moment where a large bog creature rises through the muck near R2-D2's landing site was filmed in the foundation of George Lucas's own swimming pool. The pool was under construction at the time the foundation had been excavated, and Lucas recognized that the dugout pit with its raw earth walls was exactly the right environment for the brief pickup shot he needed. The production used it. One of the most expensive science fiction films made to that point sourced a creature effect from an unfinished backyard construction project. The swimming pool was eventually completed. The bog creature shot appears in the finished film looking entirely consistent with everything filmed on a professional soundstage. Nobody could tell the difference. Fact 4, the budget tripled and Fox almost pulled distribution. The Empire Strikes Back began production with an $8 million budget. By the time filming ended, the cost had risen to $30.5 million, nearly 4 times the original figure. The overrun was the result of the Norway shoot running over schedule due to weather, the expanding scale of the Elstree sets, and the constantly growing visual effects demands at ILM Fox, which was handling distribution, became increasingly nervous about a film that was hemorrhaging money against a fixed budget. The relationship between Lucas and the studio was already tense from the original Star Wars negotiations. The overruns made it worse. Lucas's personal financing arrangement meant he bore the risk directly rather than sharing it with the studio, but Fox's distribution leverage gave them a platform to express their anxiety loudly. The film was completed and delivered. Fox distributed it. The $30.5 million production grossed $549 million worldwide. The conversations about the budget overrun ended the moment the first weekend numbers arrived. Fact 3, Kirshner fought Lucas constantly and won most of the arguments. The working relationship between George Lucas and Irvin Kershner was not smooth. Lucas visited the Elstree set regularly as executive producer and frequently disagreed with Kershner's pacing decisions. Lucas wanted the film to move faster. Kershner kept slowing it down, insisting on holding moments, letting scenes breathe, giving actors space to find things that the script hadn't anticipated. The Han and Leia scenes in particular were allowed to develop beyond what Lucas had outlined. Harrison Ford's I Know response to Leia's declaration of love, one of the most celebrated improvised lines in the franchise, emerged from exactly this kind of latitude. Lucas's instinct was to cut. Kershner's was to stay. The finished film runs at the pace Kershner insisted on over Lucas's objections. The tension between a producer who wanted efficiency and a director who wanted depth produced the most emotionally resonant film in the Star Wars saga. Both men deserved credit. Kershner's impulse was the one that survived the edit. Fact 2, critics were disappointed on release. The Empire Strikes Back is now considered not just the greatest Star Wars film, but one of the greatest sequels ever made. That was not the consensus in May 1980. Several prominent critics expressed disappointment upon release, noting that the film ended without resolution, that its darker tone had abandoned the lighthearted adventure spirit of the original, and that it felt like a chapter rather than a complete story. The deliberate open ending, Han frozen in carbonite, Luke's hand replaced with a prosthetic, the rebel fleet scattered and diminished, was read by some as a narrative failure rather than a structural choice. Audiences did not share the critical hesitation. The film became the highest-grossing film of 1980, but the immediate critical response to one of cinema's most celebrated films was noticeably mixed. A reminder that the gap between a film's reception in its first week and its reputation across the following 4 decades can be wider than anyone in either direction anticipated. Fact 1, Ford didn't know and made sure Hamill knew that he knew Harrison Ford did not know that Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father. Until the night of the premiere, he had been on set. He had filmed scenes where characters reacted to information he was not given. He had read the script, the version with the Obi-Wan line. He believed that version was the film. When the Bespin sequence played in the premiere screening and Vader spoke the real line, Ford's reaction was genuine. He had been kept out of a secret that his own co-star had been carrying for months. The moment the credits finished rolling, Ford turned to Mark Hamill. "What a quattro," he said, has been reported consistently across multiple sources and has become one of the most quoted reactions in Hollywood history. He leaned in and told Hamill, in language that left no room for interpretation, that Hamill had not told him that. The man who had spent the entire production not knowing leaned over in the dark and made absolutely certain that the man who had spent the entire production keeping the secret understood exactly how that felt. And there you have it. 14 weird facts about The Empire Strikes Back, a film personally mortgaged by its creator, directed by a man who said no first, built on a secret that 3 people kept in a room full of hundreds, and still considered the greatest sequel ever made. Which fact hit hardest? Drop it in the comments. Subscribe for more deep dives into the films that rewrote the rules and then kept the receipts. Until next time,